And welcome to my podcast. Today I just wanted to do this particular podcast on nagging your relationship to death, because I think a lot of people are naggers. Now you might find you're the nagger, or they're the nagger, or you're both naggers. But whichever way it goes, it never goes well. It's something that actually can basically start to destroy your relationship and your closeness and the love for each other, because a nagging is very destructive in relationships. When someone's nagging you, they keep telling you the same thing, or they keep telling you to do the same thing, or they keep coming back and telling you to do the same thing, and they keep checking up on you. It's actually a form of control. It's a power thing. It's a form of control. And regardless of whether they're doing it, in their opinion, to protect you or look after you, they're actually the ones who are really struggling with it. So they're struggling with the fact you haven't taken out a jumper and it's cold, or you haven't switched off the air conditioner when you should have, whatever the nag is. And I think you need to really seriously realise it's all to do with power and control. If you are the person who is nagging, you need to stop. Just let the person be. Just leave them alone and let them be, and stop trying to control their every movement. You're not the centre of the universe, really, and you need to stop. If you're being nagged, you'll actually find it really annoying, and what will happen is the person will start nagging you, and after a while you'll just passively resist them and you won't do it. It actually makes a lot of anger in the relationship, whether it's they're angry with you because you haven't wiped the floor properly or whatever you're supposed to have done, and then of course you get angry with them, but you might not be a person who verbalises that, so you just become passively resistant and aggressive and won't do anything particularly that they want. So it actually never serves any purpose. I've lived with a nagger. It drives you insane. They just nag all the time, and they don't let up. And so I was at the end of that. I found it very destroying for the relationship, because it was like being treated like you were a child almost, that you couldn't work it out yourself. And I think that's the other thing. It's very subservient to nag someone, treating them in that way. Even when children are children, they don't need to be nagged. You can encourage a child, but nagging them is never going to work. If you've also grown up with someone who nags you, your possibility of nagging other people is going to be really, really high. So if you've got a mother or father who just incessantly nagged you, watch out for that, because you're probably going to be very similar. And I want you to ask your partner if they think you nag, and have this conversation about the nagging. At the end of it all, the person makes a decision whether they're going to do it or not. Nagging them makes them maybe do it, but then there's hostility that's bred in the relationship, and that's not good. And it really is a control thing. It's because you want your own way, and you want them to do it now, and you want them to get in the car now, and whatever you want it to happen now, and you're being a control freak. And while you're being a control freak, when we're doing control and power things, there's no love. There's no love when we're doing that. So when you're nagging, it's not coming from a place of love. You might want to kid yourself that you're doing it for their own good and you're trying to help them, but really that's just for you, isn't it? It's just all about you then. You're being selfish, actually, because if they really don't want to drink any more water because they're full, or they've had enough dinner and they can't eat anymore, or maybe they can't eat anymore. Now I'm talking about adult relationships, basically, and that's why I think it's really important that you don't nag people. You can give them advice, you can encourage them, you can guide them, you can do it in a really loving way, how you now try to encourage them to take better care of themselves and encourage them to eat this or take their medication. That's encouragement. But nagging is a completely different thing. Nagging is when you don't stop. With the other ones, you say it and you tell them, I think you should maybe blah, 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 put some sunscreen on, it's pretty hot out there, whatever it is. But then it's their choice what they do. And nagging is when you go way beyond that and keep nagging them and keep at them. It's a very bad habit, and it's learned at a young age, I believe. And it's so entrenched with people, they don't even know they're doing it. And that's why I want you to ask your partner if you nag, because you might be quite blind to your own nagging. You'll just morph it into being a really caring person and looking after you. You won't see that the 17 times you ask them something that you were nagging. Talk to your partner if they're nagging you and tell them to stop it. Because they say that people tell each other the same thing over and over again because they don't think the person's listening. So the best thing with a nagger is to say, I heard you, I'll do it when I'm ready. I've heard you, it's not up to you to make that decision right now, that's my decision. You need to tell them that you heard them, and then you make your own decision. You're adults in a relationship here, you're not two children. And if you're in a relationship where you're being bossed around and nagged all the time, you're going to get pretty cranky with that person. And it's going to show in all the other areas of your life. And that's why it's bad, because you won't be as loving. You won't be as generous, perhaps, with them, with your time and the effort you make. You might try to avoid them because they nag you all the time. So actually avoid going home. You go to the shed a lot, whatever you need to do to avoid the nagging, but you need it to stop. When you first were together, they probably didn't actually nag you. They're probably being quite nice. So they're quite capable of being quiet. It's just once they kind of got to know you and that, then they started, and it just went from there. I have watched people nag other people so incessantly and so much that it's actually broken the relationship, that people have left these relationships because they cannot stand it anymore. And that's because it's all about control and power now, the other person wanting to control and overpower you all the time and have their own way and boss you around. It's like living in, I don't know, concentration camp, really. See if you can stop it. The best way if you nag is to shut up, to be quiet. When you go to, you say it once. If you have to, you say it twice, but you probably shouldn't. And then you be quiet. Most of it's none of your business anyhow. And if you don't think that they're going to do it, go and do it yourself. You know, if they're not going to put the bin out and it's going to become a nagging issue, go and put the bin out. If they're not going to wash up the dishes and it's going to become a nagging issue, wash up the dishes. But then later on, have a talk about sharing and dividing the load in the house. So you do it in a different way. Instead of nagging them, you say, later on when you're quiet, you go to them and you say, we need to talk about sharing the load with the dishes, or what nights you're going to put the bin out. It's more about having the conversation where you both talk to each other than having the pecking at the person all the time, harassing them, getting into their space all the time, telling them, 5 times, your dinner's on the table, it's getting cold. Tell them once, dinner's ready, come when you want. It doesn't really matter in the end. We're talking about 2 adults here, we're not talking about you and your children. We're talking about 2 adults. And if they don't want to do these things, then you go away, have a little think about it, come back and talk to them about it becoming problematic for you and how you can fix it. Because while you nag them, you won't be actually fixing it. They will stay in that same dynamic. So you nag and they won't do it in their resistance, or they nag and you won't do it. So you're not getting any compromise here, and you're not getting any change or any growth in it. So it's really important that you actually stop nagging and then talk about it at another time together and see if you can figure out how you're going to do it. Everyone's really, really different. Some people can also get very angry when you nag them and lash out at you and scream and yell. So you can actually precipitate that by nagging them all the time. Other people get really sulky and withhold from you and shut down on you, won't want to talk to you and pay you back that way. Other people just go out of their way not to do it and just really, really press all your buttons and annoy you back. So they just won't do it. They just dig their heels in, and that's the end of the story. And they just will not do it. And so your outcomes from nagging are never going to be any good, because people pretty much who are grown-ups have the choice not to do it, and they don't have to do it. Look at this one. I'm making a bit of a joke about it, but it's actually quite serious, because it lands up that the one person becomes very controlling, the other person doesn't like it. There's no love in all this, and there's no compromise. And there's no room to just be an individual in the relationship and decide whether you're full or not, or whether you've had enough water, or whether you want to go for a walk now because you're supposed to get healthy. It's always your choice. At the end of the day, it's your choice. You're two individuals in one relationship, but you're still two individuals. Talk about it. I want you, if you're the nagger, to stop doing it, because you're going to mess it up, and people are going to just come to resist you, and you're probably already finding that, and it's not going to be any good for your relationship anyway. You're better off work on your own stuff, deal with your own stuff, and support and love the other person, and come to some compromise, but stop nagging. So that's my little thing for this podcast. Stop nagging your relationship to death. You can fix this, you can make it better, and there will be much more harmony in your life. So I'm sending you lots of healing around it.